Welcome everybody to the football experience. We're close to 50 episodes. We're getting there.
Hey.
We're trucking along, whatever the saying is. Making up words as I go. Caleb, how are you after this weekend? I see that big grin on your face.
You and I both.
Yeah.
No, I'm good. That actually felt like a win like last season. So yeah, I'm feeling good.
Yeah.
It's just 8 o'clock over here, so a little tired.
Yeah, we'll get into that game a little bit later on. We'll start off like you gave me the news that the Ballon d'Or was today. Congratulations, Benzema.
Yeah, totally well deserved. Obviously, I don't really think. You look at Sadio Mane came second, and we were talking
Really?
about he might be an outside. Yeah,
What about third?
I think it's De Bruyne. De Bruyne, then
okay.
Lewandowski, Salah, Mbappe, Courtois, Vinicius, Modric down in ninth, and Haaland rounds up the top 10.
Wow, no Messi or Ronaldo in the top 10.
There you go.
Oh,
Groundbreaking. I mean, I don't know if you saw the comment as well from Lewandowski. He was like, "Oh, Benzema should win it, given that they don't cancel it this year or something like that." So, I think that was a little bar before our Clasico as well. But Benzema was the obvious choice, considering that we weren't taking into account the World Cup or anything at the end of the year. I mean, and I think they should just do it in seasons. I don't know what it's like, some weird time period. It always seems like they do it by years or something.
Yeah.
It's odd.
I thought they do it by calendar year because from memory, wasn't it always like in January? So it was always like January to December of the previous year. Oh man, like we can obviously get into that Lewandowski one. Like I have no idea why it was cancelled. Like at least do it over Zoom if you're not gonna have a ceremony. But like, why you still played the season? Why cancel it? Insanity. But I think that's been talked about enough. So. And then you know what's actually like insult to the wound? The fact that I think was it last year or the year before, like so the season after they cancelled it, they give him some like honorary award or something. Like they make up some bullshit award because he came second to Messi or something in Messi's last season at Barca. It's like so you make up an award just to give it to him. It's sort of like that. This will go into, I guess, the football politics, I suppose, or football political correctness. Did you hear about how they gave some guy like an honorary England cap from like the 1920s, like last week? Did you hear about that news?
No, I didn't hear that one.
So basically, he's apparently the first black player. In the 1920s, he got called up to England to play for England, but then because of racism or whatnot, he didn't play. So then now, like 100 years later, pretty much, they give him like an honorary cap and like recognize him as the first black person to play for England. It's like, no, he wasn't. Like, why are they? Why like I don't want to go into like this whole craziness stuff, but like why are we doing this shit? Like giving like honorary awards just to like make people feel better. It's a participation award, pretty much. Like if you remember those from like primary school and stuff like that.
No, it's not a participation, because in these cases, and one case is clearly more extreme than the other, but two people have been wronged in these cases and they deserve something. And while the honorary reward does not make up for how they've been wrong, particularly in this case. The Lewandowski case is a bit more trivial because we're talking about a Ballon d'Or. We're not talking about the history of racism in the Western society. But like that guy, I haven't heard the story and I'll need to brush up on it. But he's clearly been wronged. Something needs to be done. And now that doesn't make up for it, but he needs to be acknowledged, because if he was in the squad and then because of stupid racist policies he doesn't get to play, something needs to be recognised because, like you say, he made the squad and then he didn't get to play. So
Yeah,
it should go down in the history books that he was the first black player to get a cap. And
but he didn't get a cap.
yeah, well, he should have got a cap though. That's what we're saying. Because
Possibly.
of, like, do you just want to sweep that under the rug and say we were never racism? We got to acknowledge that, but it doesn't make up for the fact that this was going on, like you say, only 100 years ago, which is quite ridiculous in the advancement of human society.
Look, I agree with the whole fact that like he was wronged because of his skin color. Like, there's no denying that. But then, like, just because you're in a squad doesn't mean that you're gonna get called. Like, doesn't mean that you're gonna play. Like Ivan Toney, for instance, 2 weeks ago, he was called up for the England squad. He didn't play a minute against Germany and who was the other team that they played? Italy. They played 2 games. He didn't play 1 minute, and he was called up into the squad. Are we going to give him an honorary cap?
No, because he was never deprived the chance of getting playing minutes. This guy was deprived the chance of getting playing minutes by absolute sheer.
Well, look, the story
racism.
the story is because of racism, but who knows? Like, maybe it wasn't. Maybe now we're only saying it was racism just because, like, who knows if that was the actual story? Like, but at the same time, like, I don't agree with giving people, regardless of skin color or anything like, giving people honorary awards for something that they didn't do. Like, regardless of whether they were wronged or whatever. Like, I just don't. I just think it's
No, but it's not didn't do. It's couldn't do. They weren't able to because of some stupid rules and policies that were put into place. I mean, I think that one's too far. And the Lewandowski one as well. I think he should have just got the award because it was ridiculous. That they're both just ridiculous instances where two people have been wrong to different levels, but whatever way you can somewhat make up for it, I guess, is at least something. But it never should have happened in the first place in either instance. So I think that's something we could probably both agree on.
Yeah, like I can agree on that, but I think we just stand a little bit differently with, I guess I don't know, like I don't know what I'd call it, like just giving out awards just to make people feel better. Like, yeah, I don't agree with that. So
yeah, I don't agree with it either. If you had exactly the same opportunities as someone who did get the award and you just were beaten or whatever in a game, or you just were not good enough to win the award or whatever it may be, then yeah, I agree with that. But when didn't and couldn't are two different things for me, and these cases were couldn't because the powers that be determined that you just couldn't be in a position where you could do that. So yeah, I think that's where I differentiate between a participation trophy mentality and actually being wronged in a situation.
yeah, but like, look, I pretty much heard them talk about it a little bit in regards to the reporting when it was on TalkSport or whatnot last week. But like I said, just like a minute or two ago, who knows I don't know the actual full on details of the case, because like, what if there is like someone that's, I don't know if there's any 100-year-olds really living at the moment, especially if they were part of that squad or whatnot, or if there was anything written down. But like, who knows if he was actually wronged because of it? Maybe the coach just felt, I'm not going to play him because the game at the time didn't warrant him playing, similar to Ivan Toney 2 weeks ago. So I don't know. Who knows really in regards to that? But I guess that's a roundup of our little politics corner. And onto happier times, I guess. Actually, no. I'll bring a little bit of more bad news. So basically, I pulled a Nico yesterday.
Nico gets a mention.
I pulled the Nico. Shout out to Nico. I pulled a Nico. So I'm gonna let you guess what that is.
He pulled your hammy.
Yep, pulled my freaking hammy in the warm up as well. Pulled it in the warm up, and it was a shitty little pull as well. Like, I actually warmed up properly. Like I did my run throughs. I did my stretches. Obviously, didn't stretch enough because I didn't do anything during the week. Really, like, I exercised like twice. but I didn't do any stretching during the week. So then I was pretty much like sitting down, stationary, not sanitary, stationary. Anyway, so I did everything properly, but obviously didn't do it. I should have put in a little bit extra, and we'll basically as part of our next step of warm-ups. You know how sometimes you just do a little shooty on goal? Like we decided to do practice corners, and then basically I got tasked with tracking the back post, and the ball gets floated in over the top. Everyone misses it. It even goes over the top of my head, but it lands just behind me, and I turn and I try to raise my foot to bring it down. And I obviously raised my foot a little bit too much and overextended my hammy. Just this shitty little, it was just so crap. So yeah, I'm hoping it's more of a sprain than an actual pull or anything like that. And it's like a 2 to 3 week issue rather than 6 to 8. But yeah, I guess time will tell in regards to that.
To be fair to our boy Nico, at least he made it to the actual game, I'd say. So
yeah, at least he does it while actually playing. So yeah, it's just shit. Got nothing else to say in regards to that. It's just shit. But you know what the worst part is as well? We all we basically all carpool to the games and stuff like that. So I'm basically stuck there. It's Sunday. There's the Arsenal game. There's
so much football.
There's so much good football, and I got home I think around 6:30, 7 o'clock, and so it was 1 o'clock in the morning by the time I finished the Arsenal game, the City game, and the Real Madrid game. Just to get through it all without knowing. I knew that. I didn't know the results of the Arsenal game. I knew the halftime result to the City Liverpool one because the guys mentioned it in passing, and then I think they also said Real Madrid Barca was 2-0 or 2-1 they mentioned, but it obviously finished 3-1. But yeah, it's just bullshit.
Yeah, there was so much football on yesterday. Probably did an 8-hour shift of just watching football yesterday. And a lot of the time that was 2 games at once. So plenty to talk about today, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's a shame you didn't get paid for that 8-hour shift, but yeah. Look,
yeah, well,
we
need more likes and subscribes. So.
Yes, yeah, guys, make sure you like and subscribe the video. Also follow us on Twitter on the podcast. We need to get more engagement and stuff like that. So yeah, we can get setups. Anyway, I want to actually start off with the Arsenal game because it sort of leads into what I guess the implications of the table as well. Because Arsenal are now 4 points clear. I only want to spend 5 or 10 minutes on that. I'm not sure. Did you watch the game or did you watch the highlights at all?
No, I watched this and the Chelsea game simultaneously.
Okay. So, man, that was a word. The first half was fine. It felt like it was 50-50, maybe 55 to 60% Arsenal's way, maybe just slightly favoured towards them. Jesus looked non-existent, really. It was very strange. And then in the second half, Leeds just completely took over. That was the worst half of football we've played all season. But then I thought about it and I haven't checked the map, but we went to Bode Glint, right? On Thursday. I think they're right north of Norway, if I'm not mistaken, because apparently you can see the northern lights from there. So you need to be pretty close to obviously the North Pole or whatever it is. So that game they play at 6:45. The game finishes at 8:30, right? Who knows whether they need to travel back to I'm not sure what the capital of Norway is. My geography's off.
Oslo, I think.
Oslo. But I'm not sure if there's a direct flight from Bode. Is that the city? From Bode to England, or whether they need to go to Oslo then to England. But basically,
the state. I'm looking at it on maps. The stadium is right next to an airport. So
okay. But it might be one of those smaller ones where you need to actually catch a connecting flight to the international airport. So who knows? Like I said, who knows whether you can go directly from there to England. So they're finishing at 8:30. They may be getting back to England around midnight, maybe 1 o'clock in the morning. By the time they're all home and everything, it's like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. Friday, they're playing on Sunday. I don't know. I guess I can forgive them for looking and playing lethargic, especially in the second half.
Huh? They won the game.
Yeah, look. Yeah,
to be made.
Yeah, look. I know they didn't lose. I know they won the game, but like man, they made it tough for themselves. But at the same time, like we've mentioned this before. Like for instance, like Liverpool in their championship season. They won while, like Matthias mentioned it last pod. They won numerous times when actually playing bad and when they probably should have like drawn or even possibly lost. And I guess and like that's and like several like professionals have talked about that. Like in order to be like a championship winning team, you need to be able to win even when you play bad. So I guess this was one of those games where we really, really rode our luck and we played bad and we managed to get a win out of it, which, puts us, after the Liverpool City game, puts us 4 points clear of second. But yeah, like that was, and then the two penalty decisions or the second one that got overruled as well, like we can go into those ones. I'm sort of all over it feels like I'm a bit all over the shop. But the first penalty decision, did you see that apparently like in the build-up the player was offside, but then I assume, and the commentator mentioned it, the refs might have considered it like a new sequence of play. I can't remember whether the...
Yeah, I imagine...
But I can't remember whether the player... Yeah, but I can't remember whether the player crossed it and then we cleared it and then then they played 2 or 3 passes, or whether the player passed it back and then they played 2 or 3 passes, because that's still the same sequence. Like it's not like they played it all the way back to their goalkeeper or to their defenders.
The cross got blocked and then the ball got played backwards and then there was like a pass and then the next ball came in. So
that's the same sequence.
I can see why that's
me.
a new sequence. Yeah. When you start passing balls backwards and the defense can reset, I can see how you don't want to re-referee games.
Yeah, but how much time do they have to reset?
I don't want to get... Oh, you've got like a couple of seconds. I don't know. That one's touch and go. I guess you could say justice is done because the penalty's missed.
Yeah.
The second one, just to quickly wrap up on referees before we go into the game. The second one, Firstly, I have no idea why it was given as a penalty. I don't know why. What the hell's going on there? But then I have no idea why Gabriel's red card is overturned. I have absolutely no idea why that's happened, because he's kicked out at Bamford. He hasn't made much contact, but he still made that motion. I remember going ages back, Paul Scholes, I think, threw like an open hand at Xabi Alonso in a game at Anfield and got sent off for it. He was like this far away from his face, but he still threw it in his direction of his face. So to relitigate like decisions from 15 years ago, you could look at that as an example. I think it just matters about intent when it's something off the ball. You remember, obviously, David Beckham back in '98 with the infamous little kick on Simeone. There's not much contact there, but it's retaliation. And every time I see retaliation like that, you get sent off for it. So I don't know why that was overturned. I don't know why a penalty was given in the first place. It was never a penalty. But yeah, I think you guys should be missing Gabriel, but he's still a little bit shaky, although I thought he defended pretty well in the second half. But first half, he gives the ball away in midfield. And there was one where he got a free kick where I thought on another day, I mean, it's fair enough you get a free kick, but on another day, a referee might let that go. Because case in point, you look at Alisson last season at West Ham in a game that maybe cost us the title. Someone's jumping for the ball, but they're all over him. He doesn't get a free kick for that, and he's the goalkeeper. So Gabriel still doesn't fill me with confidence. But yeah, that just in terms of that decision, I don't know why the red got overturned, and I don't know why a penalty was given. But
and then the yellow was given.
You need. Yeah, and then a yellow was given, so you're acknowledging that he retaliated, but it just makes no sense. And that's where we need an interview. We need to hear what's your rationale behind this whole sequence of events, referee and VAR. So, but like you say, you need to endure these games sometimes. And just to your point on travel and stuff, I think first of all, that's what comes with the Europa League.
Yeah.
So when you finish in those positions, that travel, especially in the group stage, does come. But I thought more than anything, it was a bad matchup for Arsenal because, and I think I'll try and go into this a little bit later when we talk about City and sort of compare and contrast Arsenal and City, which is what we should have been doing because this midweek we should have had a game between them. But yeah, I thought it was just a bad matchup for Arsenal because Leeds are a team who I thought their strengths played into your weaker parts of your games in terms of playing out from the back. Where I think like you're not a bad team at playing out from the back, but you still do invite risk and danger when you do it more so than a City, say for example, and also defending in your own half rather than defending the opposition's half. And Leeds are very much a team that don't really play with possession but territory, so they look to play in your half at Elland Road, which is obviously can be a frenzied atmosphere. So yeah, I thought the matchup just played more of a part in making you guys look bad than say the travel and everything that went around it. Although you can acknowledge that probably had a factor in it, but yeah, I thought it just played into the weaker spots of Arsenal's game. But hey, if you can walk out of Elland Road when they're playing like that, and you guys are playing like you did with a 1-0 win, you guys are in good stead for future ambitions.
Yeah, look, like Leeds, like if there's one word to sum them up, just relentless. That's what it just seemed like. It was attack after attack after attack, and whenever we tried to transition from, like, we managed to get out a couple of times, but we would always lose it around Odegaard. Like, it seemed like they always kept on pinning and trapping him. Like, he, especially in the second half, he was like, I don't know how many times he lost the ball because he got pinned by their midfield. But like, yeah, we could not get past their midfield line, it seemed, and then they just kept on coming and coming and coming. And yeah, look, like, full credit to Leeds for putting in that kind of performance. They should have walked away with the result, in all honesty. They should have walked away with a win. And like, we really, really rode our luck and yeah, managed to get out of there with all 3 points.
It was an early, those two games with Chelsea and Arsenal. It was definitely people giving away Sunday gift. Villa, Tyrone Mings with that header to allow Mount to score. I keep saying this about Chelsea. When are we going to see a game where they're not given a gift and they actually play well and win? Because it seems like week after week, game after game, they just keep being given gifts of injuries or red cards or stupid mistakes like this. And to their credit, and to Mason Mount's credit, he took full advantage of it. Even the second goal for the free kick, I don't know what Emi Martinez is doing. The ball goes over his head. He's got to be doing better with that and probably saving it. It's not a 10 out of 10 fantastic free kick, but he puts it on target. Fair credit to him, and it's got a bit of dip. So whether he gets to it or not, but still unimpressed with Chelsea and obviously in the Arsenal game, Rodrigo with that very ill-advised cross-field pass, and what a finish by Saka when he gets into the position. But yeah, just a few gifts there, and yeah, as a Liverpool supporter, it was a little bit. I don't think we're going to really catch Arsenal, but in the Chelsea result, it was a little bit frustrating to see that Villa and Leeds were in very giving moods on that Sunday and those early Sunday kickoffs.
Yeah, I think it was after the Liverpool game, last week. Was it Paul Merson? I think he said something like, if Liverpool want to, like, there's pretty much no chance of Liverpool catching Arsenal on points, because I think Arsenal need to lose something like 8 games, and Liverpool need to like not lose 4 games, like just for the maths to add up or something like that. Because I think are we 14 points ahead of you guys still? But you guys have the game in hand.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So that's pretty much 5 games. I guess 4 games if you win your one, but then yeah, like we need to drop 4 games and you need to not drop 4 games. So it's like something like 7 or 8 games actually that we need to actually lose for you guys to catch us, because you guys are definitely going to, I'd say you guys are definitely going to lose like another 2 or 3 or even 4 games during the season. Like I'd find it hard to imagine that you don't lose, for instance, to City at the Etihad, or you don't maybe lose or draw to Chelsea at Stamford Bridge, or something like, those sorts of games, or even like Tottenham, because Tottenham kept you to 2 draws last year. So yeah, like that's, like you said, like the gap is probably a little bit, even this early in the season, it's probably a little bit too big. But it's only 10 games in. We still got pretty much a quarter of the season left, or 3/4 of the season left to go. So yeah, it's still a long road ahead, and anything can happen, I guess, since there's a World Cup in the middle of it. But yeah, moving on to the other. Should we say the main event, or do you want to just quickly touch on Newcastle United? I didn't watch that game, the Manchester United Newcastle game. I did see the stats of it. It looked like stats-wise, it looked like United dominated possession. But then, like when I heard some of the pundits talking about it, it seemed like Newcastle had the better chances, if I'm not mistaken. But I'm not sure if you watched it or not, or if you want to comment at all.
Newcastle looked the more threatening for probably the first half, maybe a little bit of the second half. But towards the end, it was... I'm not going to be sacrilegious and say it felt like a United team at Old Trafford pushing for the win, but they had good chances in and around stoppage time to win the game. No Rashford from the start, which makes a huge difference. Although when he came on, he was his old Marcus Rashford self in terms of being wasteful in front of goal. That is one area where if he wants to go to the next level, he must improve. But the team looks so much better with Rashford in it, because no one else really scares you in terms of any pace when they start with a front four of Bruno, Ronaldo, Sancho, and Antony. I mean, defenders look at that. And we're talking about Newcastle, the best defense in the league, record-wise. So, yeah, that wasn't enough to really scare them early on. But when Rashford came on, I thought he at least offered the threat, even though he didn't play particularly well. I thought Newcastle were pretty impressive in the second half. So, in terms of getting an answer to our debate on United versus Newcastle, we didn't really get it. But Newcastle has still only lost 1 game. United lost 3. Goal difference is 10 worst. But yeah, United's still above them in the table. So it was an okay game, a battle, 50-50 game, I'd say, if I had to put anything on it. And obviously United playing at home would have hoped for better, but like we keep saying, and even though I'm arguing for United to be a decent club, not a good club at the moment, but a decent, team at least, team performance and what we've seen this season ever since the farce of the first 2 weeks. But like that's taking nothing away from Newcastle, who I think have been sensational and are really building something. And I just want to touch on the Casemiro inclusion was huge for United, but they're still asking him to get through way too much work. I mean, he has to plug in gaps at the back and help the centre backs, particularly anything to do with Martinez and crosses. And then United also need him, because Eriksen wasn't in this game. They need him to be able to get on the ball in tighter spaces and play out from the back. And to his credit, he looked to do that. And I think this might be good for him, because he might evolve that part of his game and become an even better holding midfielder, even though he's 30 years old. And for me, he was the best in the world last season. But playing with Kroos and Modric is a lot different to playing with Fred and Bruno. So a lot more emphasis on his ball playing in that midfield now. But they're asking him to do too much. And if they could get a really solid holding midfielder next to it, or not holding, but a central midfielder next to him to alleviate some of that ball playing pressure that they put on him, that would be great. But I thought his difference, he almost gives United a midfield just by himself in a lot of games. So I thought, like we said when they signed him, that was a great signing, even though it was maybe an accidental signing. but exactly what United needed now. They just needed they need a few pieces around that and probably a striker. But yeah, I think you can't really call it a project with United, but I think at least under Ten Hag, they look to be trending in the right direction given what we saw in the first 2 weeks. And Newcastle, we keep talking about it. Their project is going well, and they'll look to keep progressing along that path. And yeah, that's all I have to say on that game. I think we didn't get our answer basically.
Yeah, maybe we get on the return leg later on in the season.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that leads us into the main event. We did agree that we were going to try to keep it to a short one. Like we covered 3 or 4 games and a bit of news in the first half hour. I don't know. Should I let you start, or should I just have my little say and then I'll let you have the bulk of it? I guess this was Liverpool returning to the Liverpool of old. I get old. Would you really say old? Because like it was only 3 months ago that they were playing pretty much like this, like with the same, tenacity and the same sort of speed, and the same. I guess would you? I wouldn't. I know I use relentlessness to describe Leeds. This was a little bit below. It seemed like a little bit below that par of relentlessness, but it was still there. Like I actually saw them running, I saw them defending, saw them trying to hunt the ball down, put pressure on United, on City, and it seemed like the classic Liverpool City games that we've been getting over the past couple of seasons. And you know what's actually really, really interesting? After half time, as soon as I guess the sun went down, it was almost like the crowd or the stadium became possessed. And I mentioned it in the previous pod. Like Anfield just seems different at 12 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the afternoon compared to 7 or 8 p.m. in the night. It just seems like a completely different atmosphere. And like if you can actually compare atmospheres in the first half and the second half, and they are literally night and day. And they are literally night and day, and that really seems to have pushed you on as well. And Pep made the Arteta mistake of riling up the crowd. But I guess also Pep made his usual big game tinkering mistake as well. Because when I didn't see the initial how they put the lineups one next to the other. I didn't see that. But then when I saw Cancelo with on the right hand side, I'm like, okay, because Walker's injured. But then I saw no one in front of him. So it seemed like he was occupying that whole space just by himself, and then De Bruyne was sort of there on that inside lane next to him. And Gary Neville put it perfectly. It just seemed like there was a player missing there, like a Bernardo Silva or a Riyad Mahrez on that side, just to create those triangles between the three players. And it seemed like De Bruyne was sort of missing that outlet as well on that side. And it just seemed like the balance and the shape of the team, it just seemed strange, and it didn't seem like it had that usual flowingness to it, probably because of the formation change. But even still, City did seem like City. But yeah, it just seemed like there was something missing, and it might also be because Liverpool did play up to the standards that they're meant to, that we expect of them. But also having Fabinho in midfield screening in front of Haaland pretty much, it seemed like besides that goal that got ruled out, Haaland didn't seem like he had any sort of sniff, and it might also be down to Gomez and Van Dijk being absolute fortresses in the back, and it might also be because Van Dijk pretty much had that Michael Jordan moment where he took it personally that everyone was saying that Haaland was going to dominate him. And he's just like, nah, it's not happening. It's not on my watch. But yeah, look, as a neutral, fantastic game to watch. And as an Arsenal fan, an even better result for us because it puts a slight gap between us and City. So all in all, great game to watch and great result for Arsenal. So the floor is yours.
To put in a little Arsenal in there, but it definitely is. On your first point, I won't say it was the Liverpool of old because there's a few factors that go into this and they all sort of lead into each other. But firstly, I want to start from the top with Klopp's pre-match interview. And he sounded like Antonio Conte going into the game. We've got to be ready to suffer, is what he said going into the game. And I'm just like, wow, Liverpool at Anfield under Klopp. In recent seasons, you could have put the odds at that at like 200 to 1 that he would ever say that in a pre-match press conference. And I still wouldn't take those odds. I'd just be like, he's never going to say that. And he's come out this season, has worn him down, and I guess learning from the 2020-2021 season as well, where it had a similar feel, especially going into this match. It's just like, all right, well, maybe we need to change our mentality a little bit. We all remember the Napoli quotes after the game. We need to reinvent ourselves. And that's led to us playing this 4-2-3-1, 4-4-2, 4-2-4, whatever you want to call it. It's in that mold. It's definitely not a 4-3-3 anymore. But yeah, hearing Klopp say be ready to suffer and then see it in execution in the game in moments, particularly probably the second half of the first half and maybe around where Pep loses his mind because, to be fair, where Pep loses his mind, I thought City looked threatening for about 5 minutes after that, like really threatening. It was still us who was holding it down, but Anfield was, as you say, it was awoken by Pep. Pep just couldn't help himself. It feels like everything goes against him when he goes to Anfield.
Hang on, can I just cut in?
I thought,
just for a sec, because you said it was awoken by Pep, and like I had this sort of Gremlins analogy that you're not allowed to feed them after midnight. So you're not allowed to feed Anfield after dark. And like Arteta and Pep have made that mistake of feeding them after dark.
Do you want to quickly do the decision? Do you have any gripes with it? If we do like a minute on that.
The tackle on Alisson wasn't a foul. I feel it wasn't at all. Like I feel he didn't have full control over the ball, and I feel Haaland got to the ball pretty much at the same time, maybe even like half a second before Alisson got his hands to it. So I'm fine with that. But then he pulled his shirt, like, and he pulled him back by his shirt. Had he have not pulled his shirt and like maybe just like sort of had his hand on his chest and sort of like pushed him, I would have been like, that would have been very harsh then. But because he actually pulled his shirt, fair enough. Because shirt pulling, we know it's a yellow card offense. Shirt pulling.
Yeah, and what I saw was, and we tend to see this. I think when refs have to give or VAR has to give a decision that's a big decision. Obviously, they'll look for anything in the build-up to not make them have to give that decision. So, like, I don't even think my attention would have been drawn to that foul had they not, I think, been looking for it. But I think it was enough to give a foul and negate having to give the decision. The thing I will say about the Alisson bit is, I'm pretty sure, I haven't heard that there's been a rule change, but from last season there was a game at Villa Park, I think Leicester against Aston Villa. Kasper Schmeichel fumbled a ball and I think was reaching for it while I think it was McGinn was coming in to tap it in. And what happened was Kasper Schmeichel got his hand to the ball and put his hand on the ball and like trapped the ball against the ground at the same time.
I remember that, yeah.
With one hand, and McGinn put it in. And the rule was, if the goalkeeper has the ball trapped with their hand to the ground at any point, it's their possession. Yeah. So if we saw more replays of that, well, you don't have to like the rule, but it's still the rule.
Yeah.
I didn't like the rule in that instance, but if we looked at that, we never got to saw the replays again because the Haaland foul negated it. But it would have been interesting to see if we looked at that replay again, whether Allison had the ball trapped to the ground anyway. My feeling was on the two replays that we got, I thought he did. It wasn't bobbling or anything.
I think
I don't think that rule should be in place. But at the same time, that is the rule. And if he has the ball trapped with his hand to the ground, then you can't challenge him because it's under his possession. So I think either way, that goal would have been ruled out, or should have been ruled out, and rightly so in the end. But Pep obviously feels very differently.
I think with that one, because they did show like it in slow mo again on. I'm not sure if they showed it for you, like from another angle, like a replay of it, but they showed it here on the broadcast, and from what it looked like, Allison never trapped the ball to the ground, but it seemed like he sort of got. It almost seemed like he wasn't. He was sort of more like blocking with two hands rather than like trapping and grabbing with two hands, and so he was basically like trapping it with two hands like that or blocking it, and Haaland was coming in from the other side, so it was basically hands on one side, Haaland's foot on the other, and then like obviously like has to go one way, it has to fall one way or the other. And it obviously fell favourably to Haaland. But in my opinion, it never seemed like he had full possession of the ball. So, like, if it was that decision alone, I believe that the goal should have stood. But because there was a foul in the build-up, fair enough.
Yeah. But getting back to the game, now that we've touched on probably one of the key decisions that I guess would be debated about, I thought the fact that it wasn't the old Liverpool in terms of we now play this different system compared to the 4-3-3, I thought that threw a spanner in the works that probably, look, City is City, so they can play any system and they can be pretty dominant anyway. And I thought in terms of the balance of the players he had at his disposal for Pep, I thought it was probably the right formation and system to play because it's either use Cancelo as a right wing back and use De Bruyne as sort of that inside right and overload the midfield in that way and Ake can play as a third centre back, or it's use Ake as an out-and-out left back, which is never really favourable. But the way City play in terms of their fullbacks, they don't really push them on and overlap them anyway. So I thought in hindsight, maybe even watching the game, to be fair, when I was watching it, I was just like, this sort of plays into Liverpool's new formation hands because a 3-4-3, which is what they were playing in possession, City were playing in possession, meant that we weren't overmatched in midfield like we talked about in the preview. So it was our two central midfielders. While they had to be worried about Gundogan and De Bruyne sort of dropping in the pockets, sort of behind them over their shoulders, in terms of the actual midfield battle, it was just Rodri and Bernardo Silva for the main part in front of them. So we'll go 2v2 in the midfield, where that works against the 4-3-3 because he has those two sort of deeper lying midfielders in Rodri and Bernardo Silva who can overload on the false nine press of Firmino or Jota or whoever is playing in there. And that sort of collapses Liverpool's whole 4-3-3. But with a 4-4-2 shape behind the ball, that doesn't get collapsed because you'll just have Firmino and who started up front with Firmino and Salah, which I like that tweak as well by Klopp, getting them a bit closer to the goal as well. But they can screen those two midfielders in Rodri and Bernardo Silva, and then you've got your two central midfielders who can press on them if they get the ball in any trapping cues or anything like that. So I thought that little tweak in particular just played into Liverpool's hands more, whereas if they played a 3-4-3 against our 4-3-3, then you have man-to-man battles in terms of defenders on our attackers, and then you have an overload in midfield. So whether that was... I wouldn't think Guardiola would still be planning for the old Liverpool because surely he's seen enough of Liverpool in recent weeks to know that they've gone to this 4-4-2 and to come up with different ways. But I think if they played a straight 4-3-3 against our 4-4-2 with stretching the wingers, as you say, and allowing their central midfielders to make those underlapping runs, and then the fullbacks are sort of auxiliary central midfielders for them, and that's how they create their overload in the midfield. Like we've seen in previous years, I know in Liverpool City games, one thing that you can always be sure of in the past, and particularly at the Etihad, is that their central midfielders would make us suffer, and they'd run in the channels between our fullbacks and our centre backs, while their wingers were staying nice and wide and opening up that space for them to do so. In this game, we definitely didn't see much of that at all. And that's probably due to the fact they weren't playing with wingers. I mean, Foden, you could call a winger on one side, but Cancelo needed to do the job of two players up and down there. So it took him a bit of time to get to that position up there, and they couldn't exploit it quickly. So, yeah, definitely that's definitely a good observation by you and Gary Neville in that aspect there. And I thought our coverage was a little bit different. I think we had Rafa Benitez on our Premier League coverage, and he was pointing out those key things, but he was saying it was to City's advantage, where I was actually saying I don't think it is to City's advantage. I think now with a 4-4-2 we can double up in the wide areas, so our winger can go and track on the wing back and get themselves into the picture, while the fullback can just worry about De Bruyne or Gundogan and not leave that channel open. So yeah, I think Pep, and it's always easy to say this after the fact, and on another day City could have won that game. Like I keep saying this about so many games, but on another day City I thought had enough possession, enough territory, and enough chances to win the game. And we'll probably touch on the Haaland Van Dijk battle in a minute, but yeah, just tactically, I thought, yeah, you could look at it and you could say Pep got it wrong, although City have such good players, they could almost play any system and be pretty dominant and get their advantages in different areas. But yeah, I thought that helped us a bit. And then I thought it obviously helped us the mentality we went into the game. We're not going to dominate this game. We're not going to make it a full-on ding-dong battle the whole time, because right now we're not as good as Manchester City. And it was good for Klopp to acknowledge that and come up with something different, particularly at home against Anfield, where you might have the inclination to want to be arrogant and want to go out there and say, "Hey, we're Liverpool, we're at Anfield, we should beat anyone in the world." But no, there was a proper game plan and a proper discipline to the performance that said Manchester City are a really good team in this moment, and they're better than us. So we have to, as he says, be prepared to suffer. So. Really positive signs, a really good feeling after the win, that not only obviously for the 3 points or what it means to our top four challenge, but what it might mean to us being able to play in these big games going forward. I'm not prepared to say that we're going to go on a run after this result, because I don't know that yet. I still feel like we're an inconsistent team, but it maybe has washed out that taste of that Napoli game away just a little bit, and put in this new taste that, hey, when we play a big team, particularly in Anfield, we can raise our level back to what it was somewhat last season, and we can play a good game against these big teams. And obviously, that's huge for us going forward, in particularly the Champions League.
Yeah, like it definitely is I guess, a possible statement that you're. Would you say it's a statement that you're back, or that you're at least back on track?
Maybe it's so dependent on what happens in the coming weeks. I mean, if we go out and draw 0-0 against West Ham at home in midweek, then there was no statement made. It was just a really good performance that we got up for.
Yeah.
So we need to go on with it. It really depends on that.
And look, also on the previous pod I mentioned Salah's hat trick. Maybe that was the catch-up moment, and he actually seemed interested and wanting to play in this game. Like, for instance, against Arsenal, he seemed disinterested for the whole 60 or 65 minutes that he played, like, and he seemed like a ghost almost, and like he didn't even want to be on the field. And it was also really interesting, like he got the body, he out-strengthened and out-muscled Akanji at one point, I think. At one point, he out-strengthened Diaz, and then for the goal, he got the better of Cancelo. And it's like, when it happens to Cancelo, then, man, like the naivety of him defending in that way, and like Salah just seems surprisingly strong. Like, it's probably because he has like a really strong core and he's like lower to the ground, but like, yeah, he's insanely strong. And also, I think it was Carragher, how he mentioned, it was like 5 or 10 minutes before that goal, he had a one-on-one opportunity that that Edison actually tipped wide of the bar, wide of the post, and Salah made that adjustment just to sort of dink it or lift it like half a meter, so that when Edison does put his hand down low, it actually goes above his hand. So that was actually really interesting that got pointed out. And how Salah, like, you have these, you know how in boxing or in MMA you have people that are ring smart, so they can make adjustments on the fly, and they have like a really high fight IQ. I think that's the terminology, and like just Salah being able to make that adjustment when he gets pretty much the exact same chance in the exact same spot, because the first chance was again on the D on the 16 yard line, and it happens again, and he makes that adjustment. So yeah, like, incredibly smart player, and yeah, hopefully, I guess for you guys, Salah starts to go on a little bit of a scoring run now that it looks like he possibly might have his confidence back.
And that's what we're hoping for as Liverpool supporters. I mean, having watched him for years, it doesn't surprise me how strong he is. He's immensely strong. I mean, if you did a pound-for-pound list, he'd be nearly right up the top, because obviously he's diminutive in stature, but he can hold off anyone in the world. There's no player in the world who can get their body in front of him once he gets you pinned. And you saw the way, I think that was a challenge in the second half. I know he threw off all those players you said. I think it might have been Ake, not Akanji, in the first half, but that one against Bernardo Silva, who you'd say are probably the same stature, but Bernardo Silva went flying in that challenge.
Looked like he was climbing a tree or something.
Oh, I know, it was crazy. It was interesting, that moment, because you saw a bit of aggro from Mo Salah and a few, even Van Dijk's coming across.
I'd be pissed off too.
He's a little bit aggro. Yeah, so I thought that was good to see from a Liverpool perspective, because what we've seen in recent weeks hasn't been good enough. So to see a little bit of fire coming out in that moment, as you should in a game like this,
but also
was really, really good.
There were a number of calls like that where Salah was being held or he got tackled, and the ref just waved play. Oh, and like, as a neutral, I was like, why is this being waved on? Like, this is clearly a foul. And also, I actually commented, I think it was on I think it's This Is Anfield on their Twitter page. They put up a photo like where the linesman had vision of that Bernardo Silva one, but then the photo shows that Salah has his back to the linesman, so the linesman can't see that Bernardo Silva's holding his shirt, so he can just see, like, I guess, that their arms are tied, which is, there's no foul there. So I had to leave a little comment for them about that. I'm like, you can clearly see the linesman sees his back. He doesn't see the shirt holding, and that's why it was, I guess, waved play on, and like just, but like had that have led to a goal scoring opportunity similar to the Fabinho one, it would have got called back, I imagine.
Yeah, you'd hope so. And that was Klopp's moment to rage and get himself sent off. I mean, he gets crazy aggressive with officials when something, like, he gets in their face. I mean, we all remember that one for Dortmund against Napoli, like nearly 10 years ago. He gets into fourth officials and linesmen's faces, so absolutely he should get sent off for that. You can't be doing that. I know it's such a heated atmosphere, but you can't be going into people's faces like that, especially when he's a big guy. He's like 6'3" or something. So, yeah, I don't want angry Jurgen Klopp in my face like that, that's for sure. But he should have given the decision anyway.
Yeah. Klopp's starting to get on my nerves a little, though, because, like, even in his I think in his pre-match press conference, I think he went after Didier Herman.
Yeah, I did say that.
Yeah, it's like, and then, like, I think like a couple of weeks ago he went after Gabby Bonglahor as well. It's like, why are you going after reporters that, like, are asking, or like pundits or whatever, that are just like, I guess, making statements and trying to, I guess, create conversation. Like, who knows? Like, maybe we need to watch our tongues, otherwise you'll come after us.
I don't know. I think it's a situation. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. If you're in the public spotlight and you're one of the most revered managers in the world, it's going to happen that after time, people are going to start to pick things that they don't
Yeah,
like because maybe early on when we have the tint and we're fresher to Klopp, we're like, hey, he speaks up and he goes back at these guys. That's kind of fun. But when you're used to it and you're accustomed to it, you've seen Jurgen Klopp for what five or so years now, 6 or so years now. You just get a bit tired of it, and yeah, I think it goes for any manager. Like fresh Guardiola, it's like, oh, look at these innovations, and then you see him for 10 years, and it's just like, man, he whinges, doesn't he? He thinks that, like he's always hard done by and stuff. I think it just goes in swings. The only one that I think you could say who is unimpeachable is Don Carlo. I think he's probably the only guy who's unimpeachable up there, who you just can't really say a bad word about. But for the rest, I think swings and roundabouts, they get on your nerves. But you respect their greatness in terms of Klopp, Guardiola, all these great managers like that.
Yeah, but
even Ferguson back in the day.
Yeah, but it just seems like you can't make. It wasn't like, for instance, the Haman comment. It wasn't even negative. It was just like he said. I think it just seems like Liverpool have lost their spark in recent weeks, like since the loss to Real Madrid in the final. And then he goes after Haman for winning that. And apparently, isn't Haman I'm not so, I wouldn't say he's a legend of the club, but he was part of that Champions League winning team in Istanbul, so he has some sort of status, I suppose. But obviously, it's not like a Stevie G sort of status. If Stevie G said that, Klopp would not have reacted at all. He wouldn't have said anything. Because you cannot touch Stevie G. So it was interesting he went after him because it wasn't even anything negative really either.
Yeah, definitely interesting. And whether they, being both German, maybe they've run into each other and didn't really fancy each other. So maybe there's something going on behind the scenes there. But yeah, that one was definitely
because I think he even questioned. He's like, oh, that's a great source of opinion or something. He even questioned his football knowledge or something, or his status within the footballing world, with that throwaway comment as well. It's like, yeah, that's a little bit strange. So yeah, maybe they played against each other in juniors or something, and Haman tackled him or something. He still holds a grudge 30 years later or something.
But I guess before we wrap up this game, moving from one sort of striker, attacker in Salah who scored to one who didn't in this big game, and the Haaland Van Dijk, Haaland Gomez battle. I guess the question on everybody's lips in this season was, how do you stop Erling Haaland? And the answer is still with Virgil van Dijk.
With Fabinho.
It's all three of them. Yeah, they all played their part.
That trio.
And Alisson had to make a save or two. But the chief guy, I think, was... I know Gomez got into a few battles, but like I said in the preview, it gave Van Dijk a reference point. It was just like, all right, this is the guy I need to stop. Obviously, I need to organise my defence and everything, but this is the guy. And I'm the only guy, really. I know Gomez is strong and quick, but physically, Van Dijk is one of the few centre-backs even in the world who can match up against an Erling Haaland. I still think he's an inch shorter than him as well, which is crazy to think, because Van Dijk is an absolute man mountain. But this is just what Van Dijk's capable of when he puts it together, which we haven't seen enough of this season. But if he can do this against the big opponents of the big games, Liverpool are definitely in good stead. And I think one thing we need to flag about Haaland, and I'm not criticizing or anything like this, but the narrative was he's brought in to propel City over the line in the big games, in the Champions League games, things like this. Well, I would say this was their first test in terms of that kind of atmosphere, that kind of stakes on a game, even though Liverpool were mid-table going into the game. But it's still Liverpool City, the best two teams in England of the last 5 years, undoubtedly. So, and he couldn't do it. And I'm not I'm not saying his attitude, his body language, anything like that. I thought he was fine, played fine. He looked like he cared the whole game. Obviously, this is Erling Haaland we're talking about. Even when it was getting a bit chippy in that instance where after the Bernardo Silva non-foul on Salah, he kept his head screwed on. He didn't get involved. All he was saying to the ref was, "Are you going to add the time for this?" So he remained laser focused, but he couldn't score the chances, the minimal chances, but the chances he did get a header in the first half, maybe a few opportunities to shoot in the first half as well, which he declined. So, look, it's just something to flag because I think we're getting to that territory with Haaland where we're going to start to judge him on the big game performances and whether he can carry City over the line in those games like Real Madrid in the semi-final last season. Can he be the guy who scores the decisive goals there that take him through? But the way he started against the littler teams and the lesser challenges has answered all the questions about can he deal with the Premier League. I have no idea why they were questions to begin with. I mean, look at the guy. He's built for the league. It's just ridiculous. But maybe there's just something to flag there in terms of the bigger games. And he's 22. He's going to get there. But for right now, are there question marks? Maybe. For me, we'll wait and see because he's still probably the best striker in the world with or without that experience. But he needs to do it in big games now. I know he's done it in a quarterfinal for Dortmund against Sevilla where it was pretty much a one-man show and he carried them over that hump. But now he needs to do it for Man City with a team that have genuine aspirations of winning the whole thing. So obviously he'll be fresh post-World Cup, but that's definitely a narrative I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out post-World Cup and in the knockout stages of the Champions League.
I wonder what it... Because like one thing that's coming into my mind is like, well, he had a couple... Like, yes, he had that header that he pretty much bulleted it right at Alisson because it was a pretty strong header. And then he had, I think they had that one breakaway chance where I think he played it a little bit too short to Foden, and instead of a little bit in front of him, so that Foden can either lash at it with his left foot or open up and hit it with his right foot if he's comfortable enough to do it like that. So I'm not sure he could have shot that one unless he chose to shoot with his right, because he passed it with his right foot, so it was more on that side. So his body shape wasn't correct to shoot with his left. And then there was that, I think it was in the second half, he had that one chance. It was like on the edge of the box where he sort of wrong-footed Alisson, but he didn't strike through the ball. Like he hit more of the top of the ball, and it reminded me a little bit of the Dortmund goal against Bayern. Like it was pretty much the exact same sort of setup, but it was a little bit further out. And at least the Dortmund one, he hit it a little bit more cleaner and with a little bit more power, because it was similar where Neuer went to his left, but the ball came on his right, and it was with Alisson. I'm pretty sure he was already leaning a little bit more to his left, but the ball just wasn't hit hard enough or cleanly enough. But I think it was more. It's either a question of, did this formation change hurt Haaland, because it didn't seem like he was really getting the service that he usually gets. Either from Cancelo or from De Bruyne, or was that just that trio of Fabinho screening in front of him and Gomez and Van Dijk screening behind him that really sort of snuffed him out, and anything that would come to him, it really put him off. Because there was also a couple of chances where you'd see him running through the middle to receive a pass from the defenders that would like sort of split the midfield. And Fabinho or Gomez would be right on his back and like really testing his first touch. And a couple of times his first touch was actually really bad because he was that much under pressure, and he was coming at the ball with that much pace to get away from his defender who was right on his heels. So it's probably, I imagine it's a combination of both the immense defending and the job and the plan that Liverpool had for him. And also the formation change, which I'm sure they worked on it in training. But since Haaland has come in, have they played with the 3-4-3 this season? That's the other question.
Oh, you could somewhat say that they have in terms of when they have the ball. Early season, bringing Kyle Walker infield, playing almost as a central midfielder. You could say that's between a 3-4-3 and a 4-4-3-3 in terms of the fullbacks getting in tighter. But just to wrap a bow on this topic, it's a good point you bring up about his first touch and his link-up play, because if there's one area of his game that I would say is average at best, it's probably the link-up play. And in this City team, it's not really felt because he has so many creators behind him. But it would be interesting to see if they're missing a De Bruyne for a stretch, how he can sort of evolve his link-up play to help minimise the effects of missing a Kevin De Bruyne or a Bernardo Silva or a Gundogan, just to name a few of those fabulous creators that he gets to feed off. But yeah, that link-up play for him is something he no doubt will want to improve in coming years, because I think it's definitely the weakest part of his game. The goal scoring, you can't argue with. He's 22 and it looks like he's already mastered that part of the game. So in terms of the way he can link up with teammates and become better at that, the good news for him and maybe City fans if he stays long enough with all that clause talk, but the good news for everyone involved with him at the moment is he's 22 and he has an insatiable hunger to get better. So I think he will get better at that. But it's a good point that you bring up about that, because that is definitely a weak part of his game in terms of hold-up, link-up play, interplay with teammates, something he can look to improve upon.
More to the point, link-up play under pressure, because he can link up completely fine when there's no one right up his ass. But in this game, he always had a defender touch tight, as touch tight as you can be. So yeah, those moments where he tried to link up, the ball was it almost felt like the ball was bouncing off a wall. So yeah, but I think that goes for most players, like playing with their back to goal. But like for instance, the one player that does it extremely well is Olivier Giroud. And I remember, I think it was not
at the moment.
Not at the moment. Well, yeah, but I think it was when he was at Chelsea. There was the game Chelsea vs Liverpool. I'm not sure if it ended 2-1 for Chelsea or if it was 2-2. I think it was in the FA Cup. No, I think FA Cup in that season where you guys won the title, if I'm not mistaken, and Chelsea beat you guys. And Giroud, it almost felt like Giroud was deliberately putting himself touch tight to Van Dijk, and he was getting the better of Van Dijk in those aerial duels and whatnot. So that's probably someone that he could possibly get some tape of and look at and try to emulate in those situations.
Potentially, there's a lot he could take from. I guess just to put this, it's not really a game, but a bigger picture. We'll finish with a bigger picture thing, which looks like, I know Tottenham won again on the weekend.
Are they above City now? I think they are. No, hang on. No, because they lost to Arsenal.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're equal.
Yeah, so Tottenham are somewhat back. Well, not somewhat. They are back in this sort of top 3 title sort of thing at the moment. But I guess after that North London derby, we thought it was Arsenal against City. I guess we could do all 3, but I was thinking,
hang on, Chelsea, if they win their game in hand, they're on 22 points. So they're 1 point behind City and Tottenham.
I'm not entertaining the thought of Chelsea being in the same category as those guys until the facts of their performances change. My opinion on them is not going to change.
But they got Potter.
I see something from them.
They got Potter.
Yeah, I like Graham Potter, but I just don't like Chelsea at the moment. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, what jumped out to me in the bigger picture sense this weekend was watching Arsenal before I had the chance to watch City. But like you say, we've seen City so much already over the years that sometimes you don't even watch them because you know what they're going to do and what they're good at.
It's a foregone conclusion.
Yeah, so it was just what jumped out to me was watching Arsenal be put under this test that Leeds, which sort of exposed or exploited their not so strong parts. I don't want to say weaknesses because they're a good side, so they're pretty good at everything. But the not so strong parts, and then I wanted to, in my mind, I'm just putting that up against City, and I guess we could put it up against Tottenham as well. But in terms of what teams do well in phases of play, in things that sort of determine whether you win and lose matches, really, basically. So for example, just to say defending the box or defending your own half. I think probably Tottenham are the best team out of those three at doing that. But I would say City are pretty close behind. I think City probably are an A or an A minus in terms of when you push them back and they do their defensive. And it's not very often you push them back, but when balls come into the box, Ruben Diaz is really good in the air. Nathan Ake, if he's whoever he puts next to him, Laporte, they're pretty good in the air. I mean, sometimes you have some issues with Stones if he's playing, but for the most part, I think they defend the box pretty well. Whereas an Arsenal, I'm still not 100% sure. I think Arsenal are maybe a B at that, and I think we could see that a little bit against Leeds at how ragged they looked a little bit in the second half when they were pushed to defend the box. Although they did it well and they come out with the clean sheet ultimately, but against a better side, can you do that with more finishing quality in front of goal? And let's not forget they did give away a penalty that Leeds had to miss as well, whether rightly or wrongly. So that's one issue. You look at playing out from the back. Tottenham don't even enter the conversation because they don't really do it. I don't think they're maybe a C plus at best. Arsenal,
Not
Arsenal, see,
applicable.
Arsenal are still, yeah, applicable, exactly. Arsenal, I think probably another B for in terms of playing out from the back. Saliba isn't bad on the ball, but he's not Ruben Diaz, for example. And Gabriel again, I think is a little bit iffy at times. I like that he's left-footed and he offers that sort of balance, but that's he's probably comparable to a Nathan Ake. But then Edison and Ramsdale, both very good with their feet. So I think that's maybe a bit more comparable, but I'd still City in terms of playing out still get an A for me, maybe an A minus. Whereas Arsenal, we need to see it for a little bit longer, especially if you're playing Tierney or Tomiyasu as left or right back. I think you lose a bit in terms of the ball playing there. But then on the flip side, if you put Zinchenko into the team and you want more ball playing, you lose a bit on the defensive side. So yeah, I just think in so many key areas that Arsenal's key strengths are defending the opposition's half, pushing them back, and when there's transition, when there's you need to contain the play. I think they're fantastic at that, being in shape. With the fullbacks not going forward now, they're very compact when there's a transition moment. So if they lose the ball, they're so quick to sort of contain it, either delay and let teammates get back in, or go and win that next ball and go and restart an attack. But City also are exemplary at that. I think they're pretty even for that. Counter attacking, I think they're pretty even. Arsenal with Martinelli in particular, Saka on the other side, pretty good on the counter. We didn't see it much in the second half against Leeds, but same for City. I know you don't normally attribute counter attacking play to City, but if they do have to do it, they're pretty frightening when they've got space in front of them. So I just think in terms of this season and what it means for a bigger picture, Tottenham, of course, for counter-attacking, that's one of their strengths, and that's where they play to the level of City and Arsenal as well. But I think in terms of this season, when you look at the bigger picture and who undoubtedly the best side is going for this title, I just think City do all areas of the game at probably a B plus to A minus level at the very least. Whereas Tottenham, no doubt, still have C's and D's in their game in terms of chance creation and everything like that. And Arsenal still have a few B's and B minuses in their game. So if we're going to use that sort of theory to predict who's going to win the title, I think when you throw in individual quality as well, I think still City still lead the way in that as well. Tottenham are in the discussion for that as well. Arsenal, they've got young players coming through who have fantastic individual quality. So it'll be interesting to see. I guess what I'm trying to say is, will the all-round great team win the league? I still think they will. But if they don't, it will be because Arsenal or Tottenham are so good at the areas that they are good at that it's enough to carry them through and win them a improbable, very improbable with Manchester City in the league title.
You know what? You know how I was thinking about this today, how I feel or how I predict that the season might go. I think it might go one of two ways. So the first way is that because it's a weird season in terms of the World Cup falling right in the middle of it, barring any major injuries to Arsenal, I feel like they might have a Leicester type of season where, because of the World Cup sort of ruining things, and like for instance we had like the Queen's death as well, which delayed. So it's actually had an impact on two of Arsenal's games because it delayed the Everton game, and then it delayed the midweek game that they went to have against PSV, which then it delayed the Man City game, which was meant to happen this week. So there was a bit of disruption with that. Then there's also the disruption of the World Cup. So it's going to go either the way that like Leicester just sort of like Arsenal just keep on picking up wins, and City managed to drop points to Tottenham. They probably drop points. They might drop points to Chelsea as well, like maybe a draw or something. And because of that, and because Arsenal just don't drop points, similar to Leicester, like I think Leicester only lost to Arsenal twice, and I think they had 3 losses if I'm not mistaken that season.
Yeah, they lost to Arsenal twice. I think they lost to Liverpool that season.
Yeah, so
that was the
it might be, for instance, something similar to that. Like it might go something of the way of the Leicester season where Arsenal unexpectedly win it, or
not on the same level.
Yeah, because because Arsenal went 5,000 to 1 at the beginning of the season, or it goes similar to last season where. You know how last season no one expected us to get top 4? So everyone expected us maybe just be in or around, maybe challenge for top 4. But then around March or something, like people were like, oh yeah, they're favourites. They should lock it. And then I think with 3 or 4 games left, I think we only needed to win like one of them, and we lost like 3 of those 4 games or something. So it might be something similar to that, where it comes to like March or April, and everyone's like, "Oh, holy shit! Arsenal's going to win the league," and then something similar happens where in those like we just sort of I guess like bottling it, like we bottle it and we finish second. So it might be one of those 2 scenarios, I imagine.
Well, that's another good point, because if you want to put another grading on it and add experience and mentality. Man City are just well above the other 2 teams, because that's where Arsenal would get an NA because we haven't seen it, and that's why when we did our best teams in Europe at the moment, I did sort of factor that in, and I guess I projected a little bit what we could see in the future. Like, I'm not saying Arsenal will collapse, but I'm saying there's still a possibility of that. Whereas I look at a Manchester City, yeah, sure, it's unpredictable because there's a possibility, but you don't really expect City to collapse because they've been there, they've done that, they've weathered all these storms in previous years, and they still look as hungry to do it again this season as ever. So I guess that came into my factoring. The other thing with the top 4 thing, I think going into last season, I think people would have put Arsenal around there, but the way they started the season, much like United this season, was like, well, I don't expect them to be anywhere near top 4, and then obviously they do remarkably well against those sort of lower mid-table clubs, and then they get on their little run, and all of a sudden it's like, well, Arsenal probably should finish top 4. I remember saying that around that time that you're speaking of as well, and then they bottle it as well. So yeah, it's a good point on the unpredictability of Arsenal. We could see it going either way because we haven't seen them be there and do that yet. And you add in the squad age and the manager sort of experience and age. All of these could be factors when we're talking about those really high stakes moments later in the season. So yeah, I definitely go along with that theory. And I guess was there anything else you want to say about
Um,
the Premier League or this? Okay, so
well,
yeah, just to put a bow on this and use your little Leicester analogy to go somewhere else in Europe, and this is something we need to flag. And I don't think it's quite a Leicester story, just like the Arsenal one
how are you
definitely
going away from the
isn't a
Premier
Leicester.
League, or because I had one more thing to
Yeah,
add
go.
to
Yeah,
Arsenal?
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Just
go on.
with the Arsenal thing, like with the like last season, like I don't like the. You know how like people are saying, oh, like Arsenal's like a progress and whatnot. It's a progression, and I was saying as well, like I don't think the goal was ever top four. I think the goal was fifth, fourth. Like if we get fourth, fantastic. It's well, I believe fourth last season was actually overachieving for what we were trying to build, because like I think we brought in 5 or 6 new signings, and the team was like the youngest in the Premier League. I think like Saka was 21, Martinelli's 21, 20 or 21. Like it's a really young squad. I think for last season we actually overachieved, but we still progressed. And I guess this season might be similar, where if if we're challenging for the title, it's actually overachieving where we're meant to be in our progression. Because I think I said at the start of the season, or even last season, this season should have been the one where we secure top four. Like top four is a lock. Like we're not. It's not even a challenge. Like it's an actual lock. Like so we're not in or amongst the like fifth, fourth. Come April, May, we actually like have it locked. We have it secured, similar to Chelsea last year, where they secured it with 6 games left. So that was the progression for this year, and that's where we're meant to be at. Next year, I said next year, we add 1 or 2 more players to the squad that can come in for Jesus, that can come in for Partey, that can come in for either Gabriel or Saliba as well. And maybe I guess Martinelli and Saka, like we probably need 1 player there that can play on both sides. But yeah, pretty much add 3 to 4 more players as squad players, and next season we should actually be challenging for the title. And next season the conversation should be, can we win the title? That's where I envision that the whole plan was, and where I think we're showing that we're ahead of schedule by the looks of it.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I agree with what that schedule should be and everything. And the last really good team and really good manager who I can remember being ahead of schedule like this was Jurgen Klopp with Liverpool, because every season I'd say the first season we made Champions League under him, I said, all right, I'll take a top 4 challenge. We don't necessarily have to be in the top 4 come the end of the season. Well, he did better than that. And then the next season it was Champions League final. And I know we finished third and we weren't close to City, but let's not forget that was City's Centurion season, so no one was close to City. But we were the team when we played them who matched up best, and we took away their unbeaten record when they came to Anfield, and that was sort of, all right, you know what, we probably should be challengers for them next season. Then we did go on and challenge, and then we went. So, yeah, in terms of that, like how it could progress, you should be excited that you've got potentially another situation like that developing, although obviously in a totally different way. But yeah, I agree with sort of the goals that you outlined for Arsenal as a supporter and what they should be aiming for. But just going back to your Leicester point and to move away and relate this somewhere else, because we got to flag this now. What's happening in Germany? What's happening in the Bundesliga? And the reason I don't want to go full Leicester on Union Berlin is because this team actually is not a Leicester. If you remember, Leicester were battling relegation the season before, and it took somewhat a miracle for them to even survive in the Premier League. And then it somewhat took this weird off-season scandal that got Nigel Pearson sacked and got Ranieri in the job, and then everything sort of just rolled into place. The Premier League was quite weak that season, a la the Bundesliga, although I will say the Premier League never had a team like Bayern Munich that season. I thought City were going to win it that season, and they started really well, first 10 games, and then they fell off
They
terribly
had
towards the end of
Pellegrini
the
then, yeah.
season. Yeah, under
Or was that
Pellegrini's last season.
Or was that that wasn't Mancini? That was Pellegrini.
No, it was definitely Pellegrini that season. So yeah, I don't want to disrespect Union Berlin and go full Leicester on them, because this is a team who in their 3 previous seasons in the Bundesliga have finished 11th, 7th, and last season 5th, and 5th only by a point. So we could, like, if a result went a different way in the course of the season, we'd be talking about Union Berlin as a Champions League side. So they haven't come from absolutely nowhere. I've seen a few of their games in previous seasons, and I've always been impressed by the intensity and the solidity that they show. And you know what? You see this sometimes when you've got a weaker league, or a league that's playing weak. I won't say the Bundesliga is always a weaker league, but for the last couple of seasons, it's been a little bit weaker. That's all it takes. It takes a determination, it takes a solidity, and it takes an intensity. And all of a sudden, you're looking at 5th last season, and now the start they've made to the season, they're top of the league. If you want to go by the goal difference metric, they're the second best team in Germany by that as well. And look, and you go into that game against Dortmund, and you think, I know they're at home, Union, but you think, look, this is a big stage for them. They're still top of the league, but we're getting to a point where maybe this novelty becomes something serious that we're talking about, which I think it should be now. And you're thinking, all right, well, will they have a bit of deer in the headlights? Will this stage be a bit too much for them, playing against the Dortmund side, who we thought should probably be second in the league going in? Who now, on the flip side for them, they've fallen to 8th, and they've nearly lost as many games as they've won, which is crazy. When a few weeks ago I'm like, oh, maybe they've turned it. They look a bit better. Well, recent weeks suggest otherwise. Really weird Jude Bellingham performance as well. He looked, I don't know what happened, but he was as much deer in the headlights as anyone out there for Dortmund, and Dortmund just could not cope in the first 30 minutes of that game. They were battered off the park. Probably the whole first half, they just didn't sniff the game. Union played them off the park. They outran them. They out-hustled them. And Dortmund just they looked like the team who hadn't been there, hadn't done that, and had deer in the headlights. So, yeah, it's definitely something we have to flag now. They're still top of the league. Bayern have a convincing 5-1 over Freiburg. Freiburg were a team who are still in the top 4, but I watched that game and I'm just like, there's nothing to suggest that Freiburg should be anywhere near the top 4. I think that speaks to the inconsistency of your Dortmunds, your Leipzigs, your Leverkusens this season in the Bundesliga. But Union Berlin are a team who I can see sustaining. Well, I'm not going to say definitely, but probably 95% sure in my heart they won't finish top. But I think come the end of the season, I don't want to put too much pressure on them, but they should be expecting to finish top 4 this season, and probably second even, because I think from what we've seen for over a quarter of this Bundesliga season, they're clearly 1A or 1B in the Bundesliga. You could argue they're the best team in the Bundesliga at the moment. The league table suggests it. I still put Bayern there, and I project Bayern to go above them, but definitely something to flag. And I think that Union disbelief maybe soon will be becoming believing, because they just keep rolling and they get results against good teams, and they've played Bayern and Dortmund at home now, and they haven't lost to either, and they beat Dortmund. So maybe a story unfolding in the Bundesliga, that's for sure. I feel like a lot of people are starting to believe around that team and around that club.
Do they so they finish 5th? They have Europa League, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to say, if they don't have Europa League and they only have the Bundesliga and I guess the domestic cup, then the run could be possible. But also, don't forget, Germany has a 34 match league. So they're actually pretty much a third of the way, like one game away from being a third of the way through. So they got four less games to go through than the Premier League, and there's a 4-point difference right now. And like obviously that's a draw and a win, like that Bayern need, and like a loss and a draw, and that difference is already made up right there. So I don't know. It's possible if they can sustain the run, but do they have? I think it might come. The question might come at one point: do they concentrate on the Europa League or do they concentrate on the league itself? And like, because they could get a favorable draw in the Europa League. Like, if they finish top of the group, then they don't play the teams that drop down from the Champions League. So they go straight into the quarters, if I'm not mistaken. And then, if they get a favorable matchup there, then they could easily have a path to the semis and possibly even the final.
Yeah, well, I mean, at the moment, you'd probably say their better chance of Champions League football next season is through the league. One thing on your point about the lesser games, what it does mean, I guess, unfortunately for Union Berlin, it means that the Bundesliga, I believe, is having a break after the World Cup. So
they always have one, though.
I guess that. Yeah, no, but I mean, because there's a World Cup this year, maybe that, because that's running over, but they'll have their normal winter break, and that's not great for them because you would not expect them to have a huge amount of World Cup players going to that tournament, whereas Bayern, obviously...
Isn't that good for them, then?
No, because what I'm going to say is that Bayern, you'd expect to have the whole squad going to the World Cup, so if there wasn't a break after that, maybe Bayern run into problems with being tired. Maybe they still do. And maybe Union are given this second preseason that they can get their fitness back, get their sharpness back, and go for it again in the second half of the season. So if they've still got a little bit of a lead, maybe even grow this lead going into the World Cup, I dare say that anything is possible, and they maybe could challenge Bayern all the way. But definitely not one I'm willing to put any money or any reputation on the line for yet, because it's still too improbable for my mind to comprehend that they could win the league. But I mean, who knows? If we see this story continue to unfold how it has, definitely something to at least watch in the Bundesliga, which might make it somewhat entertaining.
Well, they're going to come back because they usually get that Christmas and New Year's break anyway. So they get a month off because of the World Cup. Then they can only come back they go away mid-November, they come back mid-January, 2 months they have, and their players have every chance in the world to come back looking like Goretzka. So they if that happens, then I think that they could be a lock for the title.
Oh man, that would be fun to watch.
Yeah.
I don't think there was much to talk about from Syria.
I don't think there was any real big games there, was there?
Yeah, not really. There was Atalanta squeaked by goals in a little bit of an anomaly. They scored both their goals in the same minute, but in different halves. So they scored their first goal in the 45+1, so the 46th minute, and then they scored their second goal in the 46th minute of the second half. So I thought that was a little bit interesting. But they were 1-0 down, came back to win 2-1, and I believe there's only 4 teams in Europe now who are unbeaten, as we lost 2 in Barcelona, and we'll touch on that in a minute to finish off the pod. But we lost Barcelona and we lost Manchester City, so now we just have Real Madrid, PSG, who beat Marseille in a thoroughly unimpressive 1-0 win. I don't know. I'm starting to think about selling that PSG. No, I'm not going to, because that talent up front is just still ridiculous. But they played a 4-3-3 and they looked none the better for it in this game. But I don't think there's anything new to add there. But they remain unbeaten. And Atalanta and Napoli, they make up the 4 in the big 5 European leagues of the teams who are unbeaten this season. So Atalanta, shout out, keep it up. And Napoli somewhat, because they're still a surprise from what we expected from the start of the season. But the more we watch, the more in love we fall with Napoli. A 3-2 win, very Napoli-esque. We'll concede a few goals, but we'll score more than you. And Victor Osimhen's back and scoring. So scary proposition. But Milan also got the win as well. So I guess not much from those 2 leagues, so it will leave us just with La Liga. And before we go into the big one, there was a fairly big game on Saturday between Atletico and Athletic Club. And Atletico were able to win the game I think they held on for 1-0 away from home against Athletic Club. And they're third in the table, despite how, I guess, poor we think that they've been. I thought this was easily Atletico's best performance of the season against what is a very good Athletic Bilbao, because we put them in our top 16. I think we unanimously agreed that they should be in there in terms of clubs in Europe. But I thought Atletico were fantastic in this game. Koke was doing the work of two players in the midfield. They start with Kondogbia, a bit more of a presence. Lamar. They play four at the back. And a little shout out, because I think we'll probably look at visiting first, second, and third teams, or maybe just first team, at maybe the halfway point before we go to the World Cup, just to put a bow on club stuff before we focus on international stuff. But one guy who's in strong contention for that left back position, and everyone who listens knows I love how much I love Teo Hernandez, but Reynildo from Atletico, I think, has been their best player by far this season, their most consistent player. He's arguably the best defensive left back in the world at the moment. He's so solid in everything he does. He keeps possession ticking over. He's not bad on the ball. He's not outstanding, but he has been fantastic. Rightly so, was named man of the match for this match, and had a really good player, one who could play as a left-sided centre back, and just a player I've been super impressed with at Atletico this season. And it's pity we're not going to see him in the World Cup because he's from Mozambique. But he's been exemplary, really good. Atletico really good, and for everyone who likes Atletico and hopes that they do well, let's hope that they can play more like they did in this game, because I thought easily their best performance of the season against what was a very good team who didn't really play badly, to their credit as well.
Yeah, I didn't watch the game, so...
Fair enough. I guess it will be... That's the segment's for you to take over and take us into Real against Barca.
I don't know, like, to sort of sum up the El Clasico, it just felt... Technically, I said because the El Clasico. Well, we're off to a good start. Well, to sum up El Clasico, it just felt like a team that's been together and that's cohesive for years against a team that's building, like a team that. They have good players, but they just they haven't developed their patterns of play yet, and their understanding of each other just yet. That's what it felt like watching the game as a whole. But yeah, like it wasn't of those sort of El Clasicos of the past, especially like of the Messi Ronaldo era. It didn't seem that intense as what it used to be. I'm not sure if that's because Real Madrid still they have that part of the stand that they're renovating or something. So like it wasn't a full stadium. But yeah, Real Madrid, they, as we predicted, they came out winners. No real surprises really in terms of the result. I will say, before I hand it over to you, like the one thing that sort of pissed me off was once again a poor refereeing decision. Barcelona doesn't seem to have any luck with penalties. If you remember the Carvajal incident of Lewandowski around the 70th or 75th minute, so it was when it was 2-0. So it wasn't like it majorly impacted the result, but it could have had an impact, because I think Barcelona scored in the 85th minute, whereas if they had that penalty, they would have had 20 minutes left. Yeah. I don't know in what world that is not a penalty, where the attacking player is cutting in and a defending player is running across his line, not in front of him but behind him, and he runs straight into the back of his legs as he's running and cutting in across. I don't know in what world that's not a penalty.
The only counter I'll offer is, does he run into his legs or does Lewandowski leave his leg there to be run into? That's the only issue I had with that one and could see.
I don't think he
maybe
even
where
saw
the
Carvajal,
referee-
to be honest, because he's cutting in and the
Yeah.
Carvajal's behind him and Carvajal's running into him.
Yeah, see, I'm still not sure. I still think he might have left his leg there a little bit because the way he falls, the way he sort of drags the leg, for me suggests. But I get your point that on another day that could have been given as well, and the fact that we're probably at the Bernabeu in this game. Look, honestly, I still think that 50-50 decisions should go in the home ground the home team's advantage because
I don't think
like
that's
that for me
50-50
is
for
what
me.
home ground advantage. Yeah, see, I still think I can still bring up qualms with whether he left his leg there. So I still think it's not as nailed on as probably you think. But I do agree that probably at the new cap, you probably get that decision.
Yeah, but look, overall, it was a decent game to watch. But if you're gonna pick between, I guess the game of the weekend, it's definitely the Liverpool City game.
Yeah, and I totally agree that it was a little bit disappointing to see how little intensity there was in the
Yeah,
game
yeah.
in early. I know it's Spanish football and it's different in that way. And I guess it's a much more controlled style of football, particularly in possession. But it still felt like the sunny day had got to the players and it made them lethargic or something because it just the lack of intensity early on. And I thought Barcelona missed a trick by not coming into the game with a higher intensity. I know they're away from home, but I still think while Luka Modric and Toni Kroos are absolutely fantastic players, and Luka Modric in particular, I still think like their age, you've got to think, well, there's got to be an advantage there somewhere when we're playing 18, 19-year-olds and we've got a Frank Cassie who's a physical presence who still can't get a look in because heaven forbid we ever drop Sergio Busquets. And what really annoys me is this. And like I don't want to blame Busquets completely for his performance in this game because I thought he was poor again. But Xavi plays with a 4-2-3-1 in this game. I guess his front four, he wanted them to be a bit more fluid. He didn't want the wingers to stay right out on the touchline. He wanted to be a bit more unpredictable in what they were going to do in forward areas. So Pedri, I know it lines up as a 4-3-3, but Pedri was a number 10 in this game, and De Jong and Busquets were the two holders. Um, but Busquets can't be one of the two holders when you're asking him to cover heaps of space behind a front four. Why is that not Frank Cassie in that side? Or even Gavi playing that role, who I think could do a better role than Busquets in that role at this age. I think it's just ridiculous. And another thing I'll say, I don't know why PK gets dropped. I do know why PK gets dropped, but I don't know why he gets dropped and Busquets doesn't for what happened in the midweek. I just think it's a weird double standard. I don't know if Busquets has some information on Xavi from when they were playing together that he's just lording over his head and telling, play me. But Sergio Busquets should not be in this team. He should be in the squad for his experience. But when the big games come, you've just signed Frank Cassie. You've got Frankie de Jong, who was meant to be the heir apparent, and you're still putting him in the team. And don't get me started on the Alex Bolde over Jordi Alba. For the life of me, I still can't understand it. How are you playing this guy over Jordi Alba? I'm sorry, but the selections are ridiculous in my estimation. Like the tactics, I understand from Xavi, and I like Xavi as a manager. What I've seen, I think tactically he looks quite good. He can set up a team. He can get them into a shape, whether it be in possession, out of possession, and his defensive record with this Barcelona team has been exemplary so far. So,
Except the Champions League.
except for the Champions League and apparently this big game now.
Yeah.
So a lot of it may be that weakness of schedule that we touched on, I think, when we talked last pod or two pods ago or whenever. But I still think he's a good manager. I think his attempt to address their problem of being too predictable in the front areas, I think, was the right idea. But again, it comes down to the personnel selection for me. I still don't understand his personnel selection. I don't understand how you can keep playing Eric Garcia, even over Gerard Piqué, because I would expect, or I would trust Piqué's ability to come back from a bad game that he had in midweek better than an Eric Garcia. Alex Balde, I know he's young and maybe he wants the legs at left back, but Jordi Alba is very far from washed for me, and I still don't understand how he doesn't get into this team. So I think Xavi, while there's some things that you can say he does all right, I think there's definitely in terms of personnel selection, I think he can do a lot better. And Real Madrid continue to roll. Like we mentioned, one of only 4 unbeaten teams this season. I mean, what more can we say about this team? Benzema gets on the score sheet. Valverde, who is quickly, I think he might be in it for a shout of like the most improved player so far this season in terms of relevant players, because he was very good last season, but he's gone to the next level this season. When we mention all those young players that we're in love with right now, he should also get a mention because he's been fantastic. And the way he's striking a football at the moment, he might be one of the best strikers of a ball in the world. I mean, that can come and go. I think that's very much a form thing, unless you're Kevin De Bruyne, who constantly just strikes a ball fantastically well. But when it fell to him at the edge of the box, I'm just like, that's a goal. Because Fede Valverde, the way he's hitting the ball this season, it's going nowhere other than the back of the net. So, yeah, nothing too really insightful from what we saw from Real Madrid. So we need to see them. I guess you got to be happy with the way they dealt with the front 4 of Barcelona in terms of not having Casemiro and having Tchouaméni in there. They were reasonably comfortable for the most part. So, yeah, if you want to take something away in terms of them projecting forward, then that's maybe something you can. And that's, like we keep saying, the only question mark we have is how does Tchouaméni deal with having to replace Casemiro? But, yeah, I thought on the whole, as a spectacle, pretty disappointing. And I thought as well the right team won because Barcelona are going through a tough moment at the moment, and a really tough week for Barcelona. And I must also clean up what I said about the Champions League ties. I know I was maybe wishfully thinking that Bayern Barca game had more on the line, but really, the thing I forgot to mention was Pilsen need to beat Inter away from home, or get a draw at least. So yeah, you don't see that happening, and yeah, Barcelona are pretty much out of the Champions League, and this is a bad setback in terms of their belief for themselves as to whether they can really challenge Real Madrid for the title this season.
Yeah, I don't think we really learnt too much from this game other than Barca are just a work in progress, really. And like you mentioned, Xavi's decisions or selection decisions just keep baffling you, and that's pretty much all we learnt. Like Real Madrid is still the best team in La Liga, possibly in Europe. Just because their experience will get them over the line in a lot of those big games, not necessarily their form. But yeah, it was. It felt like it was a little bit uneventful, especially compared to previous seasons. Maybe that is because Barca are still not at that level just yet. Maybe. But one thing that I wanted to mention last pod. I think when we were talking about Xavi, I wanted to mention Xavi's just Arteta light. So, like, when they were players, Arteta was Xavi light, but now as managers, it's flipped around.
Yeah, it's come full circle.
Yeah, but Xavi he's only worked under Pep as a player. He hasn't worked under Pep as a coach. So he hasn't been part of those, like, coaches' meetings and whatnot. So Arteta at least has that over him, and that obviously helps when you do become a manager or a coach, having that experience.
Well, I will also say I know Arteta has that FA Cup win, but he wasn't performing that well at the same stage of his career as Xavi.
Yeah, but he didn't have the players that are at Barcelona.
Yeah, Xavi's been given a big stimulus package over the summer in terms of players, but that comes with its own set of problems, as we're seeing in terms of if he didn't have all these players, I couldn't question his selections because he'd be limited. But now he's got so many players to choose from, particularly in midfield. It is more possible to question the selection. So, yeah, pros and cons to everything. But yeah, funny how that's sort of role reversal on their playing days.
Yeah. So what's one thing we essentially learnt? That Busquets has some kind of blackmail over him, and Jordi Alba needs to get in on that, and if he wants to play. So that's I guess something we can take away from all this. Anything else to add before we wrap it all up?
No, I'm good. I think that's wrapped up all the football that I tried to watch over the weekend.
Yeah.
Well, not even all of it, but some of it's just not worth mentioning.
Do you just, before we do sign off, do you just want to quickly, like, because the Arsenal City game got cancelled or postponed, do you just want to quickly touch on, I think it's Manchester United, Tottenham, I think is it at, it's at Old Trafford as well. That's the only big game, and Liverpool West Ham is the other one that's, I guess, secondary to that. But other than that, there's no real other big or meaningful fixtures. No offense to the other teams around the league. But yeah, do go into that quickly. Like, I guess with United Tottenham, we're going to get two teams that play, I guess, a sort of similar style in terms of like sitting back and trying to play on the counter. So it's going to be.
Yeah,
I guess United are trying to sort of play with a little bit more possession, a little bit more ball retention, more so than Tottenham. Sorry if I'm keep cutting you off, but they essentially do play like that against the big teams, against like the Arsenals, the Liverpools, the Man Cities.
Yeah, at home though, I think particularly in those first 20-minute spells, like they did against you guys and like they did against us, I think they play high intensity and they try and get on the front foot. When the game becomes a bit more even, then they're generally forced to push back because I just don't think they're as developed in their project. We use it loosely for Man United, but they're not as developed as a squad as Arsenal and Liverpool, obviously. So they were just naturally pushed back a bit in those games, particularly against Arsenal. But I don't think there's no way you can compare them to Tottenham in terms of style because Tottenham are an out and out. We're going to sit in the shape. Mm-hmm. We're going to be compact. We're going to be defensive. Whereas United, I think sometimes the game situation can lead them to look like that. But for the most part, I don't think it's high possession that they're looking to do. Although Ten Hag, if he had his way, I think he does want to have a high possession game. But it's more, I think they just play a more vertical, more direct game in terms of getting the ball to their front four. But whenever you use the term front four, how defensive can it really be? I don't think they're that defensive. I don't think the personnel really leads them to be that defensive either. But this will be a fascinating game, no doubt. Can United bring that energy that they've been bringing to these big games at Old Trafford for the first however long, half an hour, however long they can sustain it for? Can Tottenham weather that storm? And if they do, you'll expect Tottenham to have joy on the counter-attack because Arsenal did a good job of pretty much shutting them down, but they still escaped once and got a goal out of it. So if they can do that against maybe the best team at containing you in your own half in Arsenal, my mind boggles to think what they could potentially do against United in terms of Harry Kane and Son linking up. Again, that's the fact that Martinez is 5'8" worries me in terms of that stride. If you can put Son up against him, that pace, I think he'll have a hard time of dealing with that. Varane might be better equipped, but all the injuries he's gone through. Varane was playing on the weekend against Newcastle, so I would think he would be playing. But yeah, this will be an interesting clash, particularly because United are at home. But United are going to have this build-up of fixtures against good teams away from home in the second half of the season as well. So they need to take advantage of this. And hopefully for you, they do, because they could knock Tottenham down a peg in terms of... I think we're starting to talk about Arsenal in terms of first rather than fourth. But Yeah, this is definitely the most interesting game from the Premier League, and yeah, let's hope we get a good one, and let's hope that United get an early goal so that Tottenham have to play a little bit.
Yeah, well,
Otherwise, we could get a boring one.
yeah, that's the only danger of it. Like, because I remember, I think it was last pod or the pod before, like you said, like it felt like a waste of time watching Tottenham play. Like you'd rather watch paint dry. And then United they still haven't. Yeah, they still haven't reached. They still don't excite me just yet. Let's just put it that way. So it's two unexciting teams playing against one another. Yeah, I think I'm not sure what I'd be going for as an Arsenal fan, because like if United win, then I guess they're gonna start etching closer, and if we start dropping points, then they're right there on our toes. Maybe a draw would be the best result for us, I suppose. Like both teams drop points, neither team walks away with 3. So I don't know. I'd like my heart. I guess my heart says a draw, but I feel like Tottenham. I feel like they're going to get the win in this one.
Yeah. Well, it'll be fascinating. I think it'll be hard work if they do get a win in this one. And I guess just quickly, La Liga has fixtures in the midweek, and there's not really much to talk about, although Barcelona do play Villarreal, I think, is the last game of that. So that's just one to flag and say, I still think Villarreal are a good side. They're not playing up to the expectations I maybe had for them at the start of this season, but they've had a fair few injuries as well, to be fair to them. Gerard Moreno in chief, losing your star striker is not great for them. But I think they can definitely offer a test for Barcelona, and especially for a Barcelona side that's in this bad moment. So just something to watch for. How do Barcelona react? And I mean, if they were to lose another game in this terrible week that they've had and extend this week into a week and a half, and then all of a sudden find themselves a little bit adrift of Real Madrid and having Atletico hot on their heels, if Atletico can string anything together, everything changes, and that seat becomes a lot hotter for Xavi going forward as well.
Yeah, I don't think that they're gonna get rid of Xavi though. To be honest, I think he's probably.
No, I don't. I think it's a Nagelsmann situation for me,
Yeah.
where you've got a promising young manager, not as proven as Nagelsmann, obviously, but yeah, I think it'd be.
But he's also,
from what we've seen from both.
He's also a club legend as well.
Yeah, exactly. But from what we've seen from both of them, just in terms of management-wise, there's definitely improvement to be made from both, but definitely nothing to give up on at this stage.
Yeah. Well, let's see how they go, if they can bounce back. They're playing out the camp now, so they need to bounce back, I suppose. Otherwise, yeah, I don't think the fans will be calling for Xavi's head, because I think they're still aware of the financial situation. They hopefully they're understanding that it's a rebuilding process that Xavi has taken over. So yeah,
and on top of that, you've got to understand how unlucky they were to get the group that they got in the Champions League as well.
They could have got Tottenham's group.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, well, I think that's going to be a wrap from us, unless you have any last words to add. We aimed for an hour and a half. We're now at an hour and 58. So yeah.
I say an hour and a half just so that we get it in 2 hours.
Yeah, well, I think we did well. Like, and it's always better having more content than less. So at least there's more information that we divulge. But Caleb, it's been a pleasure. I'll see you again in a couple of days, and I guess the crowd that watches us will it's not a crowd. It's a little lingering of people or something. Yeah. For those that watch us, thanks for coming, and bye for now.